I guess we should start by congratulating you for the award. I mean, that's you. At least for me, I know that since I had to pick for the actual official awards, it was exceedingly difficult to make a choice between the nominees. Are you actually familiar with all of them or a few of them? The other guys you were up against?
I've listened to. I'm more familiar with them, like just listening to excerpts on YouTube than I am in the context of the game itself.
Right.
Just because I'm pretty mediocre at keeping up with the general games out there, just because I have the world's oldest, crappiest Dell for my PC currently, and I'm just generally a cheapskate about buying games in general. But I've been trying to keep up in general. That's actually the biggest negative of being 1,000 miles away from the office is I can't spend all day looking over people's shoulders at what they're playing, which is actually something I really miss about being on location in an office. But I know it was a really great year for soundtracks in general. To my great dismay, in terms of not getting nominations for for best soundtrack in the bigger category, with Austin Wintory cleaning up, and there was just a lot of really
he walked away with a lot of stuff this year.
Yeah, there was a lot of. It was a pretty competitive year to get a mention. And I know that Hotline Miami and Fez are a couple of names that have definitely come up and that I've noticed in award season. So I know it's definitely really flattering to be in that group.
Well, your music definitely stands up with all of it. I think it's just there was a disadvantage with Torchlight coming out relatively early compared to a few of these other games, so it's not as fresh in people's minds.
Well, it's also, I mean, you could easily look at some elements from Torchlight, both the game and the soundtrack, and find them to be derivative of earlier work that me and the Schaefers have done. And I think in general, fans are a lot more forgiving and a little less interested in the fresh face. So that's also a factor, I'm sure, as well, and that's justifiable as well. I mean, there are some approaches I have that sound very similar to approaches that I did at the Diablo series, and the same could probably be said for game mechanics as well.
Yeah, actually, one of the things I wanted to touch upon was how you saw the differences between Torchlight's world and Diablo's world, and how you took that into account when you were writing the scores. Because, I mean, like you said, there's obviously some elements there that are immediately familiar, but there are also some differences. So I'm wondering how you arrived at them, basically, just working from one and then going to the next.
There are some very there's obviously some strong similarities. I mean, the whole around the world thing and some of the genre-specific stuff, like, the most obvious probably soundtrack-wise is that the middle act of the game is a, go-to vaguely Middle Eastern place. Which is the same trope that Diablo 3 used as well. Something that thing. It's like, now we're going to shift to kind of like a darker version of Aladdin. Like, it wasn't, not the most original thing. But aside from that, there are some key differences in the structure of it, in that we kind of have a intro level, kind of like a, Baby Hold Your Hand, 10-minute, 15-minute intro level, which the Diablo series never had. The approach to the title screen and the way we approach the character select screen is also fairly different. And the opening level is not really... It was actually, I thought, interesting. At first, I was a little apprehensive about it, but it came together as the art assets came in terms of the opening level where people are kind of hanging out and meditating. And and that was a nice twist on the traditional RPG, RPG formula. And I tried to do a few little Easter eggy things there. The weapons guy in the upper right corner actually whistles occasionally, and that's me whistling. And one of the soldiers hacks and coughs kind of randomly. So I tried to have with little things like that.
Oh, that's awesome. I always love hearing about those kinds of details that sneak in and that you'd never be able to pick up on if you didn't know.
Yeah, I undermixed that stuff, so it's it's more the kind of thing. The guy in the middle of town actually mutters very, very softly too. But it's more just to play people's heads when they've been playing way too much of the game at 4 a.m. That's pretty much what I live for. Is push people over to make them, feel like they really are going crazy when they played way too much of the game. That's the past couple of weeks.
Would you say that there's also a mood difference between the two franchises, though? Because that was one of the things that I was struggling to pick up on, because in Torchlight, it looks initially like it's sort of more lighthearted, but then they changed the art style in Diablo 3 as well to something, getting closer to the World of Warcraft art style. Obviously not that extreme, but would you still say that it's true that Torchlight is slightly brighter in some ways?
Well, for me, it's just, it's Jason Beck and Matt Lefferts and Patrick Blank. It's the guys that worked on it. And, when I think about the, Diablo 2, in terms of actually knowing that crew, it's, David Glenn and Ben Booz and Kelly Johnson and Mike Vashow. And, I more know the guys behind it and their mindset and their aesthetic. And so, it's, aside from, I think it being really kind of unfair to put the WoW tag around D3's art styles, and it's kind of fair and accurate in terms of who actually worked on it.
Yeah.
I see, just those guys' approach, especially a lot of Beck and a lot of Matt Lefferts, one of our 8 guys named Matt in the studio. Just in terms of their personality, in the same way, when I look at Diablo 2 and, I see the original Diablo, I see Michio Okamura, or I see the original Paladin, I see Kelly Johnson. So for me, it's, I think the industry really has a very strong interest in kind of de-individualizing some of the artists behind things, because it makes us more like commodities and more exploitable, and kind of puts all the value into the brand itself.
Yeah.
But that's not, that's really not what you're looking at. I mean, you really are looking at the personal take from, from animators and character art guys and concept guys. And, it's actually been a real privilege to get to know those people a little bit in terms of being able to see their personality and their work.
And at the risk of asking a delicate question, then, was some of that mentality on the part of the industry as a whole, was part of that what informed your decision to walk away from Blizzard and follow some of your former colleagues to Runic Games, or was that just an entirely different scenario? I mean,
not in the negative sense. When I left Blizzard the day that Burning Crusade shipped, my wife had just finished up her first semester of law school, and we had a year-and-a-half-old kid, and I knew that Diablo 3 was still at least if it was going to progress, it was still going to be a title that was a good 3 years or so out.
Right.
And I felt like I'd kind of, done my mission accomplished in terms of the year and a half I was in Irvine after the studio was shut down, in terms of putting the, doing my small part to help the music team kind of get on track to handle the, gigantic content pipeline that WoW kind of, demanded.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was just, I assumed that, I'd go be Mr. Mom. I don't know. People outside the States it's kind of inside baseball to talk about the way law school is structured, but basically, in law school, your grades your first year dictate your entire fate. If you don't get excellent grades in your first year, then you're probably never going to work for a high-level firm. You're probably never going to have a academic path or a clerkship open to you. So pretty much your entire investment is really front-loaded, and I really wanted to, make sure that was done right. I didn't feel like there was anything particularly pressing back in 2007 in terms of development needs for the title. So I just assumed that I was going to come back to Blizzard as a contractor later that year, and that just didn't work out. But that's understandable in terms of They really like to keep assets and people in-house as much as they can. And I just, I didn't have that luxury in terms of my commitments up here. And so, in a positive sense, I would say that working with Runic has always been very easy, and that they've always been extremely flexible about that. And it's our management, in terms of like Max and Travis, are the nicest, most genuine people in the world too, which also helps.
So I take it your actual workflow must have changed pretty drastically as well, then, going from being an in-house guy to essentially, like you said, being very, very far from your coworkers.
Well, the main way it changed was that when I was in Irvine, and really my last 3 or 4 years up in, or my last like 4 or 5 years really up in Redwood City and San Mateo, on the Diablo series, I was strictly music. Zero sound design. Really didn't have to worry about any other production type stuff. Really didn't need to, do any roles except for just write music. Whereas Runic is, we try to deliver something close to a AAA game experience with, like 30 devs. So everybody has to assume multiple roles. And I had to kind of dust off my sound design skills for the first time in almost 10 years.
Wow. So you put on more hats then, and probably some implementation as well.
Yeah, many more hats. So I've been very lucky in that Travis Baldry, our lead, does 7 or 8 things at a professional level. Literally, he could work as a not just a coder, but as an artist, as a designer. And one of his skills is sound, and so there's not that much to. I didn't have to worry about that aspect so much, but it was very different than I assume. Diablo 3 spent well into the millions on actors, and they're all union, etc. And multiple people worked on the story. And of course, you have some seriously brilliant sound designers like Joseph Lawrence, who I hired at Blizzard actually about 10 years ago, working on sound design. We don't really have a single dedicated sound designer. I did most of that, but some of that was also done by people in Seattle. So, roles like that are also part of the job, which I don't mind. It actually, has been fun and kept my skills kind of sharp. But it's still
it sounds like a more interesting team dynamic, since more people are doing or fewer people are doing more tasks.
Yeah, it's very different, and I think it helps. I think it accentuates the feel of the game in terms of charms that it does have, in that it feels a little more consistent and intimate, and kind of has a certain personality that comes with having, individuals having a lot of different roles and a really strong presence.
Now, one of the things I noticed on the album liner notes is that some of the music was recorded as far back as like 2010, which suggests that it was, being worked on over a very long period of time. So did that were you working from the first game straight into the second one for music, or how did it all come together like that?
That's all the orchestral stuff. I shouldn't. Orchestral was a little bit of a misnomer because we didn't use any live winds. It was all either strings, percussion, piano, harp. But yeah, we did that orchestral session very, very early in the development cycle, and I really actually had no regrets about that. And that's actually when I have done orchestral stuff the past 2 times, it's actually worked out fairly well to get stuff in the vault very early, and then kind of play with it as you develop, and then try to guess right in terms of the big orchestral moments, and then for me just do the multi-instrumentalist thing later in the project to kind of fill in the gaps, and also use some of those orchestral elements as a sample set that's better than a sample set, and that you can get intonation with like real chords for a pad for like
right.
back.
Yeah, because that's one of the things I was wondering is if you recorded the orchestra that early, then if there were changes, what do you do? Because I'm assuming you couldn't have just gone back. So, but if you were using it more as a toolkit of sound, then that makes more sense.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. And it also has to do with the multiple roles. I mean, the reality is, when a project is near done, then there's a whole bunch of animations that need sound effects. So, whereas in the first year of a project, you're kind of free to la-di-da music land, if you're wearing multiple hats like I was on this project, while the concept guys are still getting monster concepts done, and the animators are just starting to get their production line established. So,
right.
It actually, it's kind of counterintuitive. The Hollywood way of doing things is, which probably many people in the industry do, is more to rush the music in like the last month or two, with the money and time you have left.
Yeah, that seems to be the norm, for better or for worse.
But I've had good luck with a different approach, and I felt like I had really good luck just repurposing the Diablo 3 music that went into WoW Burning Crusade. I think a lot of that actually worked out fairly well in terms of, Burning Crusade was really well received, and it definitely didn't damage the WoW's momentum in terms of subscriptions and all that.
No, I mean, it's wonderful music, so it's...
I thought it worked okay, thanks. I thought it worked well. I mean, though, this stuff is all pretty mixed up, so it's pretty, I was lucky enough to be working with Derek Duke and Russell Brower, who were really talented guys, and so it was definitely a nice team dynamic there.
Yeah, well, like you said, there's a lot of people that go into the WoW series just because of the scale of the project. But I know Chris had a question for you, actually.
Okay.
I wanted to ask about, as you guys released the Torchlight II soundtrack for free some months ago. I remember coming across that and was quite excited and happy to see that. What was that your decision, or how did that decision come to be made?
I definitely was happy with it. Mm-hmm. I was really happy with the way that we approached the MP3 of the week thing with Diablo 2 many years ago, back in 2000, and I always kind of felt that it's useless to fight against the kind of general sharing of MP3s. And it's better to get some promotional capital out of it, if you can. And I really just I like the promotional aspect of having it out there free, and I like just the goodwill that it helps create. So I was actually pretty happy with that. I'd rather have that goodwill and that promotional stuff than have like a couple grand of publishing money trickle in.
Right.
And, I'd rather just have it out there.
Did you actually get responses from people directly saying, "Hey, thanks for releasing your music for free," or that sort of thing?
There seemed to be a general positive reaction. I actually have a few hundred at least copies of the physical version of that CD. So I got to make sure to get those out over the next year at things like E3 and GDC, etc.
Yeah.
Someone's up there. I'm not doing GDC this year, but
right.
I'm going to find a way to get one of my boxes up to the Moscone Center in a month.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, got to have them there. Well, it's interesting is Gary Scheinman said something very similar when BioShock was released, and they released his score for free. At first, he was not real thrilled about it, but because of the overwhelmingly positive response that it received, he ended up being very, very happy. There's the promotional aspect of it and everything. So I think that's a great, idea and a great direction to take with these sorts of things. I think it can definitely generate some extra buzz and extra promotion, and as you said, goodwill towards the company and composers.
Well, that's a big part of what Runic's approach is built on. I mean, and that's a big part of why we have a low price point. Is we want to make it kind of easy and cheap and pleasant to not pirate our game, and the release of the soundtrack like that is kind of it's worked out really well. So yeah, I definitely have no complaints about that approach.
Can you talk about any projects you're working on now or coming up in the near future?
You know, we're in a weird spot, and we're trying to just kind of squeeze the editor out the door, and at the same time, we're starting to kick around ideas fairly seriously about what the next project is.
Mm-hmm.
But I really don't know the timeline on the former, and you know, there are some stronger candidates in the office for what our next project is going to be in terms of ideas, but there's still some you know, elbows to be thrown in terms of establishing, you know, exactly what our parameters are, and
right.
You know,
there was talk of a massively multiplayer Torchlight was supposedly coming after Torchlight II. Is that still next in line?
There's always possibilities for different models, and you know, we could try to do a totally different IP, then come back and actually decide we want to continue with the Torchlight world. We could do a similar model to TL2 in terms of a single-player game, or we could try to do, you know, something MMO type. But I have absolutely no idea, and I'm probably the worst person to ask in that I haven't been up in the office much over the past couple of months. I'm kind of letting the dust clear while the editor comes out and they get the preliminary work done on getting potential story and setting stuff worked out.
Right.
So, I'll hopefully have a role in helping, you know, helping consolidate those ideas.
Yeah. Well, we certainly look forward to whatever those decisions are, and getting to hear the end result from.
I hope it's sooner rather than later. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, Matt, we want to say congratulations to you again for winning.
Thank you very much. Thanks for hosting, putting it all together. That's great.
It's definitely our pleasure, and you know, it's great to be able to put the spotlight on composers in all branches of the scoring world, and so it's so great for you to take some time and to come on, and I know our listeners will definitely appreciate it.